Here are the 10 most dangerous prisons in the world. Number 10, Kamiti Maxi Security Prison. Kamiti Maximum Security Prison is a prison in Nairobi, Kenya. The prison is within Kasarani district, bordering Kiambu County. Originally named Kamiti Downs, it sits in the middle of its own 490-hectare estates, which lie fallow and untended. During the 1980s and early 1990s, many political prisoners were held at Kamiti, including Hussein Onyango Obama, Kenneth Matiba, Raila Odinga, Koigi wa Wamir, Ngugi wa Thiongo, Jonah Anguka and numerous others. Many executions have been carried out in Kamiti. Mau Mau rebel leader Dedan Kimathi was hanged by the British colonial administration on 1957, February 18. Hezekiah Chuka and Pancras Odio Akumu were executed there on 1987, May 17. No death penalties have been held in Kenya since, although capital punishment is not formally abolished. Kenya's prisons are infamous for poor conditions and inhumane treatment, although the situation has improved slightly during Mwai Kibaki's government since 2002, and some prisoners on death row have been released. There is still no reliable water supply, with over 200 prisoners hauling buckets of water around daily. The inmates working in the industry section are paid only 10 cents Kenya shilling per day, as per the outdated 1940s legislation, which rules the organization. Within the prison, condemned G Block is famed for its particularly brutal lifestyle, characterized by predatory sodomy and mobile phone confidence tricksters. The prison was built for 1,400 prisoners, and it now houses over 3,600 in poor living conditions. On November 17, 2008, a search was carried out in G Block for mobile phones, which resulted in a brutal beating by the warders being captured on mobile phone video and given to the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, KNCHR, and shown on Kenyan TV. Kirugumi wa Wanjuki was the longest-serving and to-date last hangman at Kamiti. Wanjuki died in 2009. In November 2009, at least 8 prisoners died due to cholera outbreak at Kamiti Prison. Number 9, Guantanamo Bay Detention Camp, Cuba. The Guantanamo Bay Detention Camp is a United States military prison, within Naval Station Guantanamo Bay, NSGB, also called GTMO, on the coast of Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. It was established in January 2002 by U.S. President George Bush to hold terrorism suspects and illegal enemy combatants, during the global war on terrorism following the attacks of September 11, 2001. As of 2024 August, at least 780 persons from 48 countries have been detained at the camp since its creation, of whom 740 had been transferred elsewhere, 9 died in custody, and 30 remain. Only 16 detainees have ever been charged by the U.S. with criminal offenses. Shortly after the September 11 attacks, the U.S. declared a war on terror, and led a multinational military operation against Taliban-ruled Afghanistan, to dismantle al-Qaeda and capture its leader, Osama bin Laden. During the invasion, on November 13, 2001, President Bush issued a military order allowing for the indefinite detention of foreign nationals without charge and preventing them from legally challenging their detention. The following month, the U.S. Department of Justice claimed that habeas corpus, a legal recourse against unlawful detention, did not apply to Guantanamo Bay because it was outside U.S. territory. Subsequently, in January 2002, a temporary detention facility dubbed Camp X-Ray was created to house suspected al-Qaeda members and Taliban fighters primarily captured in Afghanistan. Amid multiple legal and political challenges, as well as consistent widespread criticism and condemnation both domestically and internationally, the detention camp at Guantanamo Bay has been subject to repeated calls and efforts for closure. President Bush, while maintaining that the facility was necessary and that prisoners were treated well, nonetheless expressed his desire to have it closed. Beginning in 2005, his administration began winding down the detainee population in large numbers, ultimately releasing or transferring around 540. In 2009, Bush's successor, Barack Obama, issued executive orders to close the facility within 1 year and identify lawful alternatives for its detainees. However, a strong bipartisan opposition from the U.S. Congress on the grounds of national security prevented its closure. During the Obama administration, the number of inmates was reduced from about 250 to 41, but controversial policies such as the use of military courts were left in place. In 2018 January, President Donald Trump signed an executive order to keep the detention camp open indefinitely, and only one prisoner was repatriated by his administration. Since taking office in 2021, President Joe Biden has vowed to close the camp before his term ends, although his administration has continued with multi-million-dollar expansions to military commissions and other Guantanamo Bay facilities. Following the release of 10 detainees from Guantanamo by 2023 of April, 30 detainees remain as of 2024 of June. Of these, 16 are awaiting transfer, 11 have been charged or convicted of war crimes, and 3 are held in indefinite law of war detention, without facing tribunal charges, nor being recommended for release. Number 8. Camp 14, North Korea. Kichon Internment Camp is a labor camp in North Korea for political prisoners and descendants of alleged criminals. The official name for the camp is Kwanlee-so, Penal Labor Colony, No. 14. The camp is commonly known as Camp 14. It is not to be confused with the Kichon Concentration Camp, which is located 20 kilometers to the northwest. Nearest train station is the Odong station of the Taegeun Line. The main purpose of the Kichon Internment Camp is to keep politically unreliable individuals classed unredeemable by the North Korean government, isolated from society and to exploit their labor. Those sent to the camp include officials perceived to have performed poorly in their job, people who criticize the regime, their children, anyone who was born in the camp, and anyone suspected of engaging in anti-government activities. Prisoners have to work in one of the coal mines, in agriculture, or in one of the factories that produce textiles, paper, food, rubber, shoes, ceramics, and cement. Livestock raising is considered the occupation of choice for the prisoners, as it gives them the chance to steal animal food and pick through animal droppings for undigested grains. Witnesses have reported that prisoners interred in the camp are required to work for long periods, often from 5:30 to midnight. Even 11-year-old children have to work after school and thus rarely see their parents. Other reports describe prisoners being beaten and severely punished for minor infractions. Food rations are scant, consisting of salted cabbage and corn. The prisoners are emaciated, they lose their teeth, and their gums blacken. Many die of malnourishment, illness, work accidents, and the after effects of torture. Many prisoners resort to eating frogs, insects, rats, snakes, and even cannibalism in order to try to survive. Eating rat flesh helps prevent pellagra, a common disease in the camp, resulting from the absence of protein and niacin in the diet. In order to eat anything outside of the prison-sanctioned meal, including these animals, prisoners must first get permission from the guards. Number 7. Bangkwang Central Prison, Thailand. Bangkwang Central Prison is a men's prison in Nonthaburi Province, Thailand, on the Chao Phraya River about 11 kilometers north of Bangkok. It is a part of the Department of Corrections. Bangkwang is the site of the men's death row, and the execution chamber of Thailand. As of 2018, the prison had about 6,000 inmates. The prison houses many foreign prisoners. It is a harsh prison that handles death row and long-sentence prisoners. All prisoners are required to wear leg irons for the first 3 months of their sentences. Death row inmates were required to have their leg irons permanently welded on, although this practice ended in 2013. In the book The Damage Done, former prisoner and drug courier Warren Fellows recounts that the prison was nicknamed Big Tiger by the Thais, because it prowled and ate. Fellows' associate Paul Hayward also served part of his sentence there. Bangkwang contains Thailand's primary men's death row and execution chamber. Death rows for both men and women also are present in provincial prisons. As of 2018 of March, 510 persons remained on death row nationwide. As of 1995, there was one man from the United Kingdom on death row at Bank One, Alan John Davis. He was the first European to receive a death sentence in Thailand. He was freed after 17 years of hell in the Bank One prison, returning to the UK in 2007 after being granted amnesty by the King. Chavirat Jaruban, the last executioner in Thailand to have performed an execution by shooting, died in 2012, having executed 55 prisoners during his career. He wrote an autobiography in 2006, The Last Executioner, and co-wrote A Secret History of the Bangkok Hilton, with Pornche Sirimonkonpul. Number 6, La Santé Prison, France. La Santé Prison, named after its location on the Rue de la Santé, is a prison operated by the French Prison Service of the Ministry of Justice, located in the east of the Montparnasse district of the 14th arrondissement in southern Paris, France, at 42 Rue de la Santé. It is one of the most famous prisons in France, with both VIP and maximum sex sections. La Santé is one of the three main prisons of the Paris area, along with Fleury-Mérogis, Europe's largest prison, and Fresnes, both located in the southern suburbs. In 1899, after the closure and demolition of the prison Grande Roquette, convicts were transferred to La Santé, either to await transfer to the prison of Saint-Laurent-du-Maroni in French Guiana, or to await execution. Initially, there were 500 cells in La Santé, which was increased to 1,000 cells in 1900. The prison has a total capacity of as many as 2,000 prisoners, divided into 14 divisions. With executions having previously been performed at the entrance to Grande Roquette, it was decided to do something similar at La Santé. The guillotine was erected at the corner of the Rue de la Santé and the Boulevard Arago, on the pavement. The first execution, and the first in Paris for 10 years, occurred on August 6, 1909. It was for Georges Duchemin, who had been convicted of parricide. On 7 May 1932, Eugene Boyer, a 27-year-old criminal who had been denied a presidential pardon the previous day by President Paul Doumer, was to be executed by guillotine. Doumer was assassinated the day the execution was scheduled, and in France the president could reverse his decision until the last moment, and obviously Boyer could not benefit from this potential ultimate mercy. So the execution was cancelled, 20 minutes before the time scheduled. He was finally pardoned by Albert Lebrun on May 13, which respected the tradition of pardoning those sentenced to death the first time in the presidential office, and he was sent to prison in Guiana. He was referred to as André Bailard in the book by Henry Charrière. Nearly 40 prisoners ended their lives in this place. It was also at this site that the second last public execution in France was performed, for burglar and double murderer, Max Bloch, on June 2, 1939. 15 days later, on June 17, Eugen Weidmann, guilty of 6 murders, was guillotined in front of Versailles prison, and on June 24, the decision was made to ban public executions. In the same decision, the death penalty was made dependent on the Court of Appeal of Seine, either Seine-et-Oise, or Aude, with prisoners executed inside Prison de la Santé. On March 15, 1940, the Vaucourt brothers, who killed 3 policemen in Issy-les-Moulineaux, were the first criminals to be guillotined inside the prison. The last death sentences by guillotine at La Santé were those of Roger Bontemps and Claude Buffet. They were the authors of an escape attempt with hostage-taking, that ended with the death of the hostages in 1971. Sentenced to death at Troyes on June 29, 1972, they were executed on the following November 28. According to them, those sentenced to death who were from the Île-de-France region, were locked in Fressens prison, which from 1978, would become the only prison permitted to host executions, but neither were executed due to the eventual abolition of the death penalty. The last 2 remaining guillotines in France are now stored in the basement of the National Center for Guidance, in Fressens prison. In 2000, The chief doctor of the prison, Veronique Vasseur, published a book in which she denounced the very poor imprisonment conditions. The book was a shock to the public, and prompted parliamentary evaluation of the situation. In 2014, the prison closed for renovations, which required 5 years to complete. Number 5, Mendoza Prison, Argentina. Argentina's Mendoza prison has come to be associated with unimaginable horrors. It is a place where humiliating treatment, torture, and death are common. It was designed to house 600 convicts, but it today houses 1,600, causing extreme overcrowding and a shortage of essential supplies. In 2005, Amnesty International condemned the unforgivable conditions within Mendoza prison, highlighting the sad reality faced by inmates. Many prisoners, especially those who are awaiting trial, leave its confines having endured cruel treatment and abuse, and in worse shape than when they arrived. Tragically, even the prison guards contribute to the suffering, known for their violence, not only of inmates but also of their families. This culture of violence and cruelty extends a cycle of desperation and depression. Mendoza prison stands as an example of the failures of the Argentinian justice system. As many as 5 inmates are packed into each 4 square meter cell. Septic tanks are limited, leaving the majority of the inmates to defecate in plastic bags and urinate in plastic bottles. To top it all off, there are no medical records for the prisoners, and medical staff is only called in after an inmate has died. Number 4, Gildani Prison, Georgia. Gildani Prison, officially known as Gildani No. 8 Correctional Facility, is located in Tbilisi, Georgia. It gained significant international attention in 2012, when a series of videos surfaced, showing the abuse and mistreatment of prisoners by prison guards, sparking widespread protests across the country. The Gildani prison scandal was a political scandal in the country of Georgia, involving the recorded abuse of inmates in the Georgian prison system. On September 18, 2012, several videos were released showing prison guards torturing, taunting, and sexually assaulting detainees in Gildani No. 8 prison. The scandal highlighted the widespread torture in the Georgian prisons, under the United National Movement government. The scandal was unique in Georgian history in that it was initially shared and discussed on social media, before the story began to appear on Georgia's largely pro-government television channels. The highly controversial video footage resulted in orchestrated rallies in cities such as Tbilisi, Batumi, Poti, Kutaisi and Gori. Upset by images of graphic prisoner abuse, protesters demanded justice and promised to continue their protests. Later that night, Katuna Kamakhalidze fired David Chakua, the chairman of the penitentiary department. Several days later, Kamakhalidze herself resigned. The video evidence of prison torture was leaked by a former prison officer, Vladimir Bedukadze, who fled to Belgium and was briefly wanted in connection with the abuse, but eventually, the prosecution decided to relieve him of criminal responsibility as a result of plea bargaining deal, on the grounds that Bedukadze helped to uncover systemic crimes in the Georgian penitentiary. In the videos, prisoners are shown being raped with broom handles and police batons. The first video shows 10 prison guards conducting physical and verbal abuse on prisoners. In the second video, a man is forced to take off his underpants and do what he was told. He is then insulted and spat upon, and during the offense, an attacker makes references to him being a thief in law. In the last part of the video, the man is seen writing something under dictation. In the third video, an Armenian prisoner is shown fettered to a cell rod, and cursing Georgian prison officers. In the same video, a masked man is appealing to the torturers not to record a video of him. He is mocked, humiliated and possibly raped. The third part of the video shows a rear view of a man, who is repeatedly asked if he was thief in law, answers of which were all, "I am a thief in law." In the fourth video, is shown youth detention center, where inmates were physically abused, and forced to insult thieves in law, under threat of being raped if they did not comply. The scandal led to major political upheaval and reforms in Georgia's prison system, including the dismissal of officials and the resignation of the Minister of Corrections at the time. Following these events, the Georgian government pledged to overhaul the prison system, especially on human rights, improving conditions, and tackling corruption within the correctional facilities. Number 3, Black Dolphin Prison, Russia. Federal governmental institution, Penal Colony No. 6 of the Federal Penitentiary Service of Russia, in Orenburg Oblast, commonly known as the Black Dolphin Prison, and formerly known as NKVD Prison No. 2, is a correctional facility in Soiletsk, Orenburg Oblast, Russia, near its border with Kazakhstan. The prison is one of the oldest in Russia, and one of the first in the Orenburg Oblast, to accept prisoners with life sentences. It gets its unofficial name from a prisoner-constructed sculpture depicting a black dolphin, which is set in front of the main entrance. Originally, Black Dolphin was a jail, ostrog, for those sentenced to life at hard labor since at least 1745. After the suppression of Pugachev's rebellion in 1773, the prison was updated for the deportation and confinement of robbers. The prison houses approximately 700 of Russia's worst criminals, including child molesters, murderers, terrorists, cannibals, and serial killers. Prisoners at Black Dolphin are all serving sentences of life imprisonment. The prison began accepting these inmates on November 1, 2000. Inmates are kept isolated in cells that have a set of 3 steel doors. For 90 minutes a day, they exercise in a large cage. During this time, cells are searched for contraband or illegal items. Inmates are also under 24-hour surveillance. They are forced to stand, and forbidden from resting or sitting on their bunk from the time they awake until bedtime, roughly 16 hours. When prison officers make a command to the inmates, they must respond with the words, "Yes, sir." Every 15 minutes, a guard makes rounds, to ensure Black Dolphin inmates are complying with the rules. The prisoners are fed soup 4 times a day, and are only allowed books, newspapers, and a radio. Prison guards place blindfolds on arriving inmates, so that they cannot map out the prison or plan escapes. The inmates are also blindfolded, whenever they are transported between buildings. Black Dolphin prison officers have a unique form of escorting inmates. Prisoners are kept bent over at the waist while a guard holds their handcuffed hands behind their back, higher than the hips. This escort control tactic allows for maximum control, while depriving the inmate of a view of his immediate surroundings, preventing them from escaping or attacking prison staff. Number 2, ADX Florence, USA. The United States Penitentiary, Administrative Maximum Facility, USP Florence AD Max, commonly known as ADX Florence or the Florence Supermax, is an American federal prison in Fremont County to the south of Florence, Colorado. ADX Florence, constructed in 1994 and opened 1 year later, is classed as a supermax or control unit prison, that provides a higher, more controlled level of custody than a regular maximum security prison or high security, as it is called in the federal prison system. ADX Florence was commissioned when the Federal Bureau of Prisons needed a unit designed specifically for the secure housing of those prisoners, most capable of extreme violence towards staff or other inmates, including inmates deemed too high profile or too great of a security risk. The inmates are confined for the most part of the day in single cells with facilities made of poured, reinforced concrete to deter self-harm, and are under 24-hour watch, carried out intensively with high staff-inmate ratios. The institution is unofficially known as ADX Florence or the Alcatraz of the Rockies. The complex includes a minimum security camp, as of February 2019, held more prisoners than the Supermax unit. The number of inmates has declined, and as of 2021, 2 housing units have closed due to low population. Florence houses male inmates in the federal prison system, deemed the most dangerous and in need of the tightest control, including prisoners whose escape would pose a serious threat to national security. On October 22, 1983, Thomas Silverstein and Clayton Fountain, members of the Aryan Brotherhood, fatally stabbed correctional officers Merle Klutz and Robert Hoffman at the United States Penitentiary, Marion. The stabbings took place only a few hours apart, and were blamed on inadequate prison design. Federal Bureau of Prisons Director Norman Carlson proposed a new facility to isolate the most dangerous, uncontrollable inmates for security and safety. Under his leadership, USP Marion was operated in permanent lockdown for 23 years, serving as a model for ADX as a control unit prison. Carlson believed that the prison would hold criminals who were desperate enough to murder corrections officers, or other inmates, in the hopes of being sentenced to death. He argued that as draconian as these measures were, they were the only way to deal with inmates who have absolutely no concern for human life. Florence opened on January 10, 1995. The county already had 9 prisons, but the lure of 750 to 900 permanent jobs, plus temporary jobs during the prison's construction, led residents to raise $160,000 to purchase 600 acres for the new prison. Hundreds of people attended the groundbreaking for the facility, which was designed by 2 architecture firms in Colorado Springs, and cost $60 million to build. In 2012, 11 inmates filed a federal class action suit against the Bureau of Prisons in Cunningham versus Federal Bureau of Prisons. The suit alleged chronic abuse and failure to properly diagnose prisoners who are seriously mentally ill. At the time of the lawsuit, at least 6 inmates had allegedly committed suicide, a 7th did so after the original lawsuit was filed, and an amended filing added him to the case. Critics claim that the use of extended confinement in solitary cells severely affects prisoners' mental health, a conclusion supported by numerous studies. As of 2015 of March, settlement negotiations were underway with the help of a federal magistrate. Some changes have already been made by the Bureau of Prisons. And number 1, Diyarbakir Prison, Turkey. Diyarbakir Prison is a prison located in Diyarbakir, southeastern Turkey. It was established in 1980 as an E-type prison by the Ministry of Justice. After the September 12, 1980 Turkish coup d'état, the facility was transferred to military administration and became a martial law military prison. Control of the prison was returned to the Ministry of Justice on May 8, 1988. The capacity of Diyarbakir E-type prison is 744. However, the prison is sometimes overcrowded. When the Human Rights Commission in the Grand National Assembly of Turkey, GNAT, visited the prison in 1996 of October, it had a capacity of 650, and was accommodating 942 prisoners. Diyarbakir-type prison, which is provided for political prisoners, can hold 688 people. What has been called the period of barbarity or the Hell of Diyarbakir, refers to the early and mid-1980s, in particular the years between 1981 and 1984, where the prisoners in the newly built Diyarbakir Military Prison No. 5 were exposed to horrific acts of systematic torture. According to the Times, it is among the 10 most notorious jails in the world. Between 1981 and 1984, 34 prisoners lost their lives. In August 2009, plans were announced to convert the facility into a school. The idea was criticized by Kurdish activists who wanted the prison to become a museum of human rights abuses. Although construction on a larger prison outside of the city has already begun, no decision over what to do with the existing Diyarbakir prison has been made. Kurdish activists and politicians find their plans for a human rights museum, known as the Museum of Shame, largely ignored by the state government. As of now, Diyarbakir is still a functioning prison. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe. And stay tuned for the next video.